Hi folks, in this second episode of Atebeno Park, we're going to look at the rest of the entrance area. Last time we did the area to the left as you came into the park, and this time we're going to do the area to the right. Uh, so pulling out from where we were last time, I preset some pathing and some of the buildings, an information center, a restroom, and the apparel, and did a foundation element for structure right off the entrance building. So this is that foundation with a couple of ramps up to it. This is going to be the accessibility services area. And I carried over some of the theming of the plants from the other side of the entrance building. Uh, so I put in some concrete to connect it more directly to the entrance building, and now I'm going to be building the structure itself. I started with the arches because, as you can see, they didn't end up evenly placed. Uh, so I'm going to have to fix that a little bit. Uh, these will be both windows and passageways into the building, and more solid walls for the rest of it. But I've had an idea that I wanted to intersperse walls with windows, and I thought I would get it all done with the single grouping, but that didn't work out. So I went back and uh, did each of the 4-meter units as a separate component of window and wall. Um, put that second one there in there to give me the spacing that I needed to fill with the window. So a little bit of lower wall. If I'd been smart, I would have sized that to fit at this point, because you'll see me correct it later. So the window goes in, recess it just a little bit into the wall, and then size it to fit in the opening. This would have been a little bit easier to do if I didn't already have the plants there, but I kind of jumped the gun when I got the idea of carrying the planting effect over. So having that unit, I could now reproduce it and keep the spacing that I wanted to get, and run it down the other side for the end unit. And because I'm doing the corner windows, you can see me fiddling, trying to get it to behave so I can have the corner window on each corner, because that is standard building symmetry. And then working to get the walls and windows lined up. So this building is much longer than the space with the arches, because I figure there will be offices in here and also storage for some of the facilities that would be provided for the guests with accessibility needs. This would be on the order of wheelchairs and mobility scooters. In fact, the second bay, the one nearest to the end I'm working on, is where I envision the mobility scooters coming out to be positioned so the guests can take command of them to journey through the park. The ramps are obvious there. I did an elevator in the other building, and it's ramps here. And there will be elevators and ramps throughout the park in order to make it more accessible. And there's no functionality of that in the game, or there, well, certainly not now, and I doubt there will be. But it seems something that would add to the verisimilitude of the park. And I thought that is a good thing to promote. So obviously I could run this a bit faster and not have to chat so long. And yeah, they can't all be speed builds, right? Um, so it's a little boring to look at, so I have to give you a little more chatter here. You'll see me struggling a bit with getting the walls across to be the outside uh, of the building. I have discovered this strange thing where the walls kind of fall over on their side when you duplicate them. And I'm not quite sure how that's happening or why. It's probably something to do with the settings of the checkboxes. And then you'll see the other problem where I inadvertently grab the base of the gizmo tool to move something rather than a single arrow, and then get things that go uh, off the plane that it was sitting on, and then I have to sometimes struggle to restore that. Uh, but once get it in place, it's relatively easy enough to duplicate it. But you see one of the things that happens after you grab that plane, you can see this whole wall is at a slight angle. And even though it's moving along and keeping the wall itself all in a line, it is getting off the foundation on the left side. So I'm going to have to grab that whole chunk of wall and realign it to the foundation. It's an annoying thing that happens sometimes, and just, life would be better for me if I could manage to, grab the arrow that I intend rather than the box at the base of the gizmo tool. The next thing you'll see me struggling with here is getting that little bit of highlight from the foundation that you can see on the left consistent across the whole back, because it adds a little bit of dimensionality to what's basically a pretty plain wall. And that's okay. This is not supposed to be a fancy part of the building. It's mostly intended to be functional. So just like the other building, I would prefer if this one were an adobe type surface instead of the concrete. But concrete is all we have right now. So concrete it is. It's the closest thing to the adobe. Concrete, of course, is very colorable these days with various mineral pigments. So I've been hoping that the devs will take that into account and make the concrete be colorable. It doesn't quite have the same surface texture as adobe, but close enough for my purposes in the game, and I can live with that. The large section you're seeing there that doesn't have a window, that's going to get a doorway. And you're now watching me correct those longer section of walls to shorter ones because I was getting Z fighting. I don't know if you'll be able to see it on your screen, but I could certainly see it on mine. And that's very annoying when you're just looking at things. And I'm going to be doing a bit more of that, and I think I'm going to try to speed that bit up. So let's go a good bit faster to get through that. I did warn you about this a little bit earlier in the video. So anyway, there will be a jump coming up because, as is my unfortunate habit, I got more focused on building than recording and didn't record a significant amount of work on this structure. So now I'm putting a trim band in at the top of the wall and trying to get it to echo the trim band that's in the entrance building, in part by getting it the same height. It's not quite the same reflectivity, even that's something that happens in some of the building pieces we have versus the prefabricated buildings. I had been hoping to get that whole wall top in a single piece, but it started to refuse to get any bigger, and even going through the usual tricks of saving the game and coming back to it, I couldn't get that piece to get any longer. So the ultimate solution was to come back and use two pieces for it. So, uh, so there's that jump. You can see that the upper level is done, and I've done a good bit of the interior, and it's labeled with accessibility services, with counters, seating area for someone who's waiting. You can see the two areas. The one in the back there where the cursor is where those mobility scooters would come out. And another lost clip as I did the portico running from the restroom along behind the information center, and also the big structure at the far end of the other side. That is an elevator tower for our accessibility challenge guests, and you can see the stairs for the regular guests in the archway with Crownie atop it. The Atebeno Park has gotten some concrete walls sunk into the surface a little bit to take away the more wooden appearance of it. So right now I'm lining up to see what it looks like for our guests who are coming in. The first level was sitting on the elevated area of the entrance area. And as you move through, those trees clear up, and suddenly you can look up and see Crownie again from that glimpse you got at the very beginning. The stairs still need some more work, the upper area as well, and some other details. The last thing I wanted to do in this one was get this fencing in so none of my guests end up in the pond. And that, the lawyers hate that when people get in the pond and start suing you. So also dealing with the pond, time to put in a little bit of vegetation and beautify it a little. I'm doing all of this with just a general idea of what I want. And so you will see in the course of this, I'll come back in other videos, either pointing it out, or you may just happen to notice it, that I have made some changes to what you're seeing in this video, or at that point it'll be pretty much in any previous video, as I've either had another idea or something has been required for a change in order to make it fit something I've done later. I may or may not call all of those out because I may forget about them in the heat of the moment of doing the current build or whatever it is that's distracting me at that time. So you'll notice I'm choosing a selection of plants that aren't always the expected for the tropical nature of this island's environment here. Partly for variety, partly because not all of these plants are exclusive to the biome that they are presented in the game. The bit I'm working on right now is something, again, in anticipation of capabilities that will come in the future. I would like a small waterfall here, which will, add to its ambiance. Going with giant Amazonian water lilies in this little pond, mostly to bring an exotic element in there. That one's just too big for this little pond, so we'll go with a smaller one. Also decided that the ones near the rocks were probably a little too close to that little waterfall to be, so I moved them. And this is not intended to be a really spectacular thing, just a little bit of ambiance and something to break up the the man-made nature of a lot of the entrance area. So a little bit of more work to blend in that rock work. And in fact, this is one of those things. This rock work is extended from where it was when I built this side of the entrance area. Uh, and you didn't get to see a video of that, but it happened, and there it is. Um, so a lot of vegetation placing. I'll also be doing a certain amount of terrain painting in this section, again, to make things look a little nicer. If you haven't looked at my tutorial on terrain painting, you get much better effects overall with the settings very low for the intensity of the painting, and that helps things blend and look a little bit more natural. Uh, Other tricks for terrain work is doing things like using trees to sink them in the ground and emulate larger areas of foliage, nondescript green things that change the color and texture of the visuals without all the number of pieces of using individual smaller plants. So for those with less powerful computers, being able to do that will keep the game playable longer for you. So that, I think, is starting to look decent. Um, there's always a few more things that can be done. And you will catch me doing that throughout the videos and in between the videos, as I said before. Uh, and occasionally I will slip and get a rock the wrong color. So you caught me fixing that. And now adjusting the rock height again to keep visitors out of the pond, rather than giving them a stepping stone to get around the wall and get into it. The lawyers are always after me about that, right? Um, so here's some of that terrain painting I promised you. And also the terrain painting necessary to keep the grass from coming through the pavements. The elevator building didn't have a path, and it needs to have one, otherwise our guests can't use it. And the thing needs to be blended in so it's satisfactory. The door arrangement for the elevator that I set in there, I copied from the other building. And because we can't separate things from groups or join things into groups at this stage of the game, it's part of the same group as the building on the other side, which ultimately could be awkward. But eventually also we'll be able to split things off, and I will be able to cut it out from that group and add it into the group that is this elevator tower. So one of the things I was thinking about this entrance area, recall me mentioning that they're not classic tropical biome plants over by the pond. I wanted to bring in something different on this side too. This is all intended to be sort of a teaser to the guests of some of the different environments they will be encountering in the park, here by this entrance arch into the park proper, where all the bigger animals will be. So, it's not cohesive as being, all the same sort of build as one might expect from an attempt to make it look uniform. But instead, the choice here is to have it evoke the park as a whole rather than one particular environment, whether that be something artificial within an exhibit or something that's based primarily on the nature of the park's actual biome, which of course is tropical at the moment. That's the only kind of place we can build right now. So I couldn't stand not having the wall corner trimmed, and I had to put that in before walking away from this section of build. You also saw the usual thing about double clicking on something and getting an extra piece that I needed to delete. Yeah, okay. So there it is. See you in another video. Subscribe, please, if you'd like to see more.